So welcome to tonight's webinar, Training the Competitor Within, Mental Training Tactics for Triathletes, with David Glover and Krista Schultz. I'd like to introduce Krista real quickly. So Krista has been a triathlete for more than 10 years. She started out running Division I track in college at University of New Orleans, where she majored in exercise physiology. She's worked with a number of different athletes in sports, from professional hockey and football and to cyclists, professional swimmer, as well as a number of triathletes. As a triathlete herself, she's qualified for and competed in the Ironman World Championships in Hawaii, and she represented the state of Maryland for the Best of the U.S. Amateur Triathlon Series from 2006 to 2008. Krista still competes and enjoys doing running races as well. In fact, since moving to Boulder 3.5 years ago, she's also picked up downhill and cross-country skiing.
Thanks, David. David Glover is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, so he's very familiar with hard work and determination. And he's also a cancer survivor, and he's written a book called Full Time in Sub-9, and it's about his experience at the U.S. Naval Academy and surviving cancer. So David, he has also a master's degree in exercise physiology. He's competed in 28 Ironman distances, won 5, and he was also inducted in the Vineman Hall of Fame. So, yep, David Glover.
So why mental training? And if you've been to any of our webinars before, you know I'm a big fan of quotes, and so I try and come up with new ones for each thing. But I found this one I thought was pretty good. The body is much stronger than you know. It is the mind that is the weakness. So I think a lot of times as athletes, we focus on our training and our training plans, and as triathletes, we have to swim, bike, and run, and we may also do other activities like yoga or Pilates or CrossFit. But one of the aspects of training that is often neglected is mental training. And in fact, when researchers looked at Olympic athletes, this was back in, I believe, the 1986 Olympics, or maybe it was 1986 or 90, they looked at over 200 athletes, and they looked at them across 3 areas: mental, physical, and technical readiness. And what they found is that the only predictor, all else being the same, of eventual gold medal performance or medal performance was mental readiness. So all the athletes were talented, all of them had trained really hard and had good technical skills, but what set the podium winners, the medal winners, apart from the others was whether or not they had practiced and implemented mental training. So although we may not be mental or Olympic athletes, there's still some things we can apply, some tools that we can use so that we can perform better and ultimately beat ourselves. So I'll give you a little bit of an example for myself. So I started doing triathlons in 1995, and for me it was about, I just got been diagnosed with cancer earlier that year, so I wanted to do something I hadn't done before. So it was a big challenge for me, and I immediately fell in love with the sport. And right about the time I started, I moved to Reston, Virginia, which had a triathlon community there. In fact, the Reston area Triathletes is one of the original triathlon clubs formed back in the 1980s. But I managed to hook up with a number of friends, and my next door neighbor talked me into doing my first Ironman in 1997, so in my 3rd year of racing. And I ended up loving the distance and the challenge, and to me it was a huge puzzle. So there's all these little pieces, and I was trying to figure out how to put all these pieces together, and then some of these pieces were on the mental training. And for any of you that have done a triathlon or marathon or any other type of endurance event, you're out there a lot of the time, even though there's competition around you, you're out there with yourself and your head, and it a lot of times you find yourself talking to yourself or thinking thoughts. And what I observed for myself is as I started doing the longer distances, I began looking for ways to get through the long training rides, the long runs, to put in the necessary volume when I was tired, to not be bored. And during my racing, to look for ways to, how do I stay focused? How do I, keep going at a steady effort without slowing down or getting distracted? And what I found most interesting is when the athletes I trained with, we were in training, we go out and swim, bike, or run. We were all roughly about the same level. One of us may have been a little faster swimmer, another may have been a faster runner. But what I found was I at the shorter distance, I was pretty close to these guys, but at the longer distances, I could do much better, sometimes an hour, maybe even 2 hours faster. And it wasn't necessarily physical ability because we were all doing the same long training rides and had the same training routines. And so what I realized is a lot of it was the mental preparation and things I had learned from the military and things I read about and applied to my own training and racing. And what we want to share with you tonight is some of the tools that Krista and I have learned over the years that have helped us be more effective athletes. And ultimately, whether your goal is to finish on the podium or just to finish, to have a more rewarding experience. And so the 5 tools that we're going to talk about tonight are conscious commitment, setting actionable goals, creating a pre-race plan, staying in the moment, and being flexible and stay positive. So the last one's sort of a catch-all, as you'll see. So conscious commitment, and another great quote I found, in order to make dreams come into reality, it takes an awful lot of determination, dedication, self-discipline, and effort. And if I could think of one word that sums up those 4 things, the determination, dedication, self-discipline, and effort, I would probably pick commitment. And so by conscious commitment, it's making a conscious decision to yourself of, yes, I'm going to do this, whatever you're trying to do. But before anything else, I think the most important question to ask is why. What's your why? Why are you out there doing this? And I mentioned earlier when I first started, my reason for doing my first triathlon, I always wanted to do one. I just kind of never did one until I got cancer. So for me, my why was, well, I wanted to prove that although I had cancer, cancer didn't happen to me. And so it became this effort by myself. I wanted to prove that, even though I had this disease and, I'd gone through radiation and surgery, that I could overcome it and continue to get healthier and healthier. And if you ever read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, it talks about his experiences in a World War II concentration camp and why and how some people were able to survive and some gave up. And he uses this quote by Nietzsche: "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And you could easily apply that to racing as he who has a why to race can bear almost any how. And any how means anything that happens, you're able to deal with it because you have that reason. And it could be any reason. It's really up to you. But I think it's a real important question to ask because when you're out there in your race, whether it's a 5K all the way up to a marathon or an Ironman or beyond, there's going to be times when you want to stop or you want to slow down or you just don't feel like pushing yourself. It's really important to have that why because that's something you can fall back on to really allow yourself to dig deep.
So, what is your commitment level? This slide right here is nice because it gives you an idea of where you are on that continuum. And what this means is when you have, let's say, you want to do an Ironman or you want to do 6 triathlons next year and a half marathon. So how reasonable is that? Can you commit to that? Do you have the time? Can you train for those things? So are you on that end of it, or is this just something? I've got a little bark in the background. Is this just something that you wish to do and you really don't have the time to commit, or maybe you're injured and it's too much of a, too much for you to take on right now? And one of the things that helps me determine where I am on this continuum, especially if I have a big goal or even some little goals that I'm trying to work towards, such as maybe running races or triathlons in the summer. I like to write down my priorities, and the priorities help me figure out, what's most important. So if, I do want to train for these races and do well, and let's say I have children or I am writing a book, for example, and I want to put time into that, what's more important at that point in time? And, if it isn't training for these events, then you may want to rethink your goals. So let's say you really want to focus on this book you're writing and you don't have time to put in the run volume. Maybe that's something that, you want to cut back on the race, or have an option to do instead of I was talking to a client of mine earlier, instead of a half marathon, she said, well, I could always switch into the shorter distance if I don't get the time in. So having that in the back of your head, based on what your priorities are, and just something that will change. So I always encourage people to sort of rewrite your priorities, maybe monthly or every couple months, just to kind of reassess your goals.
Yeah, and I think a key point here also is to write it down and share your priorities. So if you have a spouse or significant other or family, share those priorities. And I'm always impressed when I see couples where one maybe is an Ironman distance athlete and maybe one might do international distance, and they'll pick years. So 1 year, the guy that maybe he wants to do an Ironman, he does the Ironman that year, and his training is a priority over his wife's. And the next year they switch, and the wife focuses more on her training. So I guess the one thing when you think about commitment, it is a continuum, and you can change, you can move up and down. I know for myself, when I was single and was less interested in my career and more interested in triathlon, I was very high up on the commitment continuum. Now, as an athlete, I'm lower. Not that I don't want to train, it's just I'm not as committed to getting faster, but my commitment towards educating athletes and trying to present information like this webinar is very high. So, key thing is, it can change. So the second tool we want to talk about is set actionable goals. And I like this quote by Goethe that says, what you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals. So it's goals, when looking at research and, in psychological literature, a few years back, researchers looked at more than 100 studies on goal setting, and what they found is that more than 90% of them showed positive or partially positive results. So it's one of the most repeatable findings in psychological literature that the goal setting can really work. And I think we all talk about goals, and especially with the new year, now's the time to set goals, right? Because we're new year, new you, new me. But I think it's important to differentiate the types of goals, and then as well as provide some guidelines. So that's what we want to do here. So I want to talk about basically 3 types of goals. So the type of goal on the left with the metal is basically an outcome goal. And that's what it is. It's something you measure as a result of. So something that you can observe. So an outcome would be winning a gold medal. It could be doing a sprint triathlon in an hour, 40 minutes. It could be finishing fifth, top 5 in your age group in a 5K. So something measurable by the outside world, and these are good. And for me, as an athlete, I had a long time goal to go under 9 hours in Ironman. And it took me 10 races to do it, but I eventually did it, and then did it again. I think it was like another 12 or 15 races later. But those goals are motivating, but at the same time, they're sort of outside your control. So things like the weather, the other competition, whether or not you get a flat. So the thing to keep in mind with these is they're good to have them, but they can also lead to disappointment if you don't achieve them. The second type of goal, and this is Krista, she had just finished the Columbia Triathlon, and do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about your race that day?
Oh, well, that was a good race for me because there were some things that I was able to achieve, and not necessarily a PR, but I was able to nail my run pace, which is really important. If you know the Columbia Triathlon, it's a very hilly run course. So one of my goals was to really, focus on not going out too hard, but sustaining a good, reasonable pace from the start. And then also to execute my nutrition plan, which even in, the Olympic distance racing is key, especially on a hard, hilly course and a hot day. And, just hydrating and taking in the nutrients I need was important for me. And I was able to hit all those goals. So it's not necessarily, again, the outcome goal, which David was talking about, in the first type of goal, um, but these other goals that help us achieve that outcome goal.
Right. And I like to, and I've seen them referred to as a number of different things, but the name I like to use is learning goals. So these are goals where you learn something, you experience something, and Krista mentioned, she may not have had a PR that day, but she learned, she was able to pace herself well, and she was able to execute her nutrition plan successfully. So these are things that aren't necessarily observable, but things that gave her some sort of satisfaction for achieving. And the third type, and I put a check mark next to this because this is sort of your day in, day out goal, and these are process goals. And the best way to think about these is, as the picture shows, as stepping stones. So they're going to get you from point A on the bottom all the way up to point Z at the top. And so these are the little goals that kind of get you to your bigger goals, your outcome goals on the left, and your learning goals in the middle. So we'll talk a little bit more about the process goals. And the best analogy again is a stepping stone. So if you think of a big goal, if your goal, for example, if you're doing a half marathon and maybe your fastest time in the past was 2 hours and 10 minutes, so you want to try and break 2 hours this year. So that's an example of an outcome goal, and your race is 6 months away. So that you've got 6 months to get to that. So the process goals are those stepping stones to get you to that 2 hour half marathon. And an example of a stepping stone might be to join a running group. And this does a couple things for you. One, it gives you a group to train with, so you can train with people that are potentially faster and push you. And if you can join a group with a coach, you can get feedback. So that your goal for that 6 months may be to join a running group with a coach and attend 2 run workouts a week. So that's something that is measurable. So pretty simple, and you can do. And then each week you can review that and say, okay, am I doing that or not? And then as you go along, you may want to work in other things as well. So you may observe that you tend to fade later in the race. So another process goal might be to start doing strength training. Another might be to, I'm going to practice what I'm going to eat and drink during my race. So these are, short-term things that you can do.
So on the shorter term, you could do a daily journal of process goals. And I was just talking with a client of mine, Sarah, earlier, and we had developed some process goals for her to focus on each day. And we sort of decided we're going to revisit these because it's very helpful if you want to reinforce good habits such as nutrition or strength training. It might even be remember to eat protein with each meal, which we did talk about, and eating your simple sugars around exercise. And some of the strength training exercises that you might have to do on a daily basis if you have injuries or, any imbalances. And, typically I know with Sarah, we work out pretty much every day. So maybe it's trying to do a yoga class each day or, just getting specific stuff. And I know one thing that she does that's helpful is she prints out her workouts and sort of checks things off, or puts it up so she can see it. And it's just like any process goal. You want to complete those little goals, which turn into those big outcome goals.
Probably one of the most useful tools that a friend of mine got me started on. This actually came out of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People course, is developing a weekly priority sheet. So for each of the roles I play in my life, athlete, race director for Luray Triathlon, coach, husband, dog owner, brother, son, friend, each of those areas, I write down what I want to do for a goal that week. And so it becomes a helpful tool, so I can look at it and say, okay, here's what I want to accomplish this week. And at the end of the week, I typically maybe only accomplish half those, but I can also just roll them forward to next week. So some tips for goal setting. Use the SMART acronym. So I'm going to run through these real quick. So simple, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And I'll give you an example. So I mentioned earlier, if I were, my goal for 6 months from now is to run a half marathon in 2 hours, my example of a goal to get to that goal would be I'm going to work out 2 times a week with a running group that has a coach. So it's simple. It's, I said it in one sentence. It's measurable, right? Either I do the workout or I don't. It's achievable. So for my schedule, if I'm, it's something I can commit to doing because I have the time available. It's just a matter of going to the workout sessions. It's relevant. So it's relevant to my broader goals. So I believe by attending these 2 sessions per week, it'll help me get faster so I can achieve my half marathon goal in 6 months. And it's time bound. So I'm putting a boundary of every week I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this for 6 months. So that's a pretty good example that covers all those. One key thing to do with any goals is write them down. So if I can't emphasize this again, I will write them down. So make them real. And I put another example at the bottom, similar to the run workout. For swimming, it might be swimming masters workout 2 times per week. So that's goal setting. So the third tool we want to talk about is creating a pre-race plan.
So I have a really good example. About a year ago from today, I was preparing for a half marathon, and a friend of mine who I also get coaching advice from, she asked me what pace I was going to run this race at. And, I told her, it's just a training race for me. I'm not sure. I'm just going to see how I feel. And then she quickly encouraged me to think about, where my race pace would be and to focus on that for at least the first 3 miles. And then if I had to dial back, I could, but go out and be very deliberate with, what kind of pace I'm going to run. And I listened to her, and it was amazing how well it worked, because I wasn't very fit, but I did have a personal record that day because I didn't have to make up a lot of time. I was able to go out at a pace that I thought I could hold for that half marathon distance. After 3 miles, I reassessed, but I was still able to kind of stay within a reasonable pace, and I didn't have to, speed up at the end to try to overwork and make up for time. So having that race plan for me really worked. And I sort of didn't want to think about it because I didn't want to put the pressure on myself, or, there's a million reasons why we want to say, oh, it's not that important, this or that. But it's really good to have one regardless if you're, it's an A race or a training race, or you're just going out to have fun.
So, and your race plan is really your roadmap for race day. And how I like to do them, and I've, for any clients who've worked with me as their coach and they're targeting their target race, what I like to ask them to do is to write out a race report before the race, but write it as if it had happened how they want it to happen. So basically walking through the race from start to finish, from arriving at the race site to any race morning preparation, to where you're going to seed yourself on the swim, to how you're going to break up a swim. So for example, go from buoy to buoy, how you're going to pace yourself on the bike, etc. And an example of this is actually a segment of the Ironman Hawaii bike course. And if you look at it, you can say, okay, I know there's a climb up to Hawaii. So up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a climb up to Hawaii. So during that climb, if I'm using a power meter, for example, I might say, okay, I'm just going to maintain 200 watts. So for me, that's a decent power output. And so I have that goal in my head. And so when I get there, I don't get overzealous and just blow myself up by trying to maintain 300 watts, which I can't maintain for that long. And so if you think about the race that way, whether it's using heart rate or perceived effort or just, I'm going to feel comfortable, whatever it is, but, have that in your mind, as Krista mentioned, even, if it's right before the race, just having an idea, okay, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to feel, this is what pace I want to run, will really help you on race day. And a key point is to especially identify and address areas of concern or uncertainty. So for example, if I were to pick one area where athletes have the most trouble, for many athletes, it's the swim. So the mass swim start, especially when you start looking at some of these races like the bigger Ironman races where they have a mass swim start with 3,000 people, it's a little overwhelming. So having a plan ahead of time, and it may be something like, okay, I'm going to start towards the back, or I'm going to start towards the side so I don't get caught up in the melee, or I'm going to wait for the gun to go off a couple minutes for other people to get started, and then I'll go. So having that plan ahead of time can help reduce some of that fear and that uncertainty. And definitely, this is where having a good coach or a more experienced friend athlete can help you with, give you that feedback on, okay, how do I get around this problem, or what do I do? I know there's going to be winds in Kona. What's the best way to deal with them? And once you have your plan, it's important to practice it. So, if in a general rule, if you can write out your plan, 4 to 6 weeks ahead of time, that's awesome. And then what you want to do is part of your training. So in addition to your swimming, biking, and running, is to practice your plan through visualization. So that's basically playing the race in your mind as if you were actually doing it. And a key thing, and research has shown that visualization, similar to goal setting, is effective. And you want to use all 5 senses. So sight, smell, touch, taste. I'm missing something. Anyways, so yeah, use all 5 senses, and sight, sound, touch, feeling, tasting. Okay, I think that, well, so, example might be, I'm going to arrive on race morning. I'm going to take a deep breath of the fresh air, breathe in the smell of the ocean. I'm going to feel calm. I'm going to observe the sunrise. I'm going to feel relaxed. I'm going to look around. I'm going to set up my transition area. So practice that in your head. And, if you have that plan written down, you can actually just read through that. And then over time, you'll start to remember it. And when you visualize things, visualize how you respond to things. So using Ironman Hawaii example, when I get to I feel the wind on my bike as I'm on the Queen K Highway. I know it's going to blow me, but I feel comfortable and confident because I've trained in the wind, and I'm confident in my skills. So it's a way to prepare yourself mentally. It's a way to build confidence, and it's a way to picture your race. And this is a picture. This is the second time I broke 9 hours, and this was in Roth, Germany, at their challenge race, which used to be the old Ironman Europe before they split from Ironman. But when I did this time, I had already done the race in my head probably 100 times, from start to finish. And I had the luxury, I had done the course a couple times before, so I knew what to expect. But I had visualized everything from start to finish. And then when it came to race day, it was almost like playing a tape. Like I already knew, okay, this is, the end of the bike. I'm going to stay strong, even though I'm tired. I'm going to push through the run. I'm not going to slow down. So just having those cues that I already practiced over and over made all the difference. And you can apply visualization to your training too. It doesn't have to be just about your racing. So the next tool we want to talk about is stay in the moment. And living in Boulder, we've had an opportunity to train at Scott's Masters and his swim workouts, and I've actually done some webinars with him as well. But if you're not familiar with him, he's a 6-time Ironman world champion, one of only 2 people that's done that. The other is Mark Allen. He just turned 60, I guess about a little over a week ago. So, and this is a picture of him last year at the Luray Triathlon. So the guy's still in phenomenal shape, an incredible athlete, but also an incredible coach. And, one thing, and I've listened to him talk a lot and give presentations, and one thing he repeatedly comes back to is this: do what you can do in the moment. And it's something very simple, but it's very profound, because he's basically saying, look, you can't control what's already happened, it's done. You can't worry too much about what's coming up, because in some cases you don't know what's going to happen, but you can control what you do right now. And so do what you can do right now.
Yeah, and when you think about certain distance races, a lot of people, I work with all different level athletes, and I'll get some people saying, well, how can you do an Ironman, or how can you do a half marathon, or how can you do a 5K, or, how can you work out on a daily basis? So no matter where you're coming from, it's taking it in pieces. So the event, the race, the day, you just break it up. If I thought about, a long distance race I was doing and what I was doing going forward, I would probably get more down on myself and say, God, in the next so many miles, I'm not going to feel good because I don't feel great right now. Rather than taking this quote and saying, okay, I'm going to do what I can right now and focus on my, body mechanics, or, the nutrition I need, or just, smiling at the crowd. So it makes a big difference mentally and psychologically.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I had the opportunity to do, well over 100 triathlons, and including 28 Ironmans. I've talked to hundreds of athletes, and I don't think I've met a single person that's ever had a perfect race. So, there's gonna be ups and downs, and I've been on Ironman races where, almost halfway through the bike, I'm like riding a high and thinking, God, this is great. Then 10 minutes later, I'm just down in the dumps. I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna finish. And so it is, some cases can be an emotional, physical, and mental roller coaster. And so, as Krista said, if you can just take that one chunk, it's okay. Well, I just got to get to the next buoy. I just got to get to the next aid station, and then I'll figure out what to do after that. So how do you stay in the moment? And one of the tools that I used without even realizing it was a tool as I started racing is basically doing that continuous self-check-in. And you're basically asking yourself, so you're talking to yourself, but it's in your head, hopefully, although I'm sure I probably talk it out loud sometimes. But it's really checking in with yourself. How do I feel? It's a reminder to remind myself to relax my breathing. How's my pace? Am I going too fast or too slow? Do I need to drink something? Do I need to eat something? I'm on the run. Relax my shoulders. Settle into it. So it's a continuous loop. So what this does is it keeps your mind active and engaged, and so you don't start drifting off and thinking about, oh, I wonder what the post-race party is going to be like, and wonder if they're going to have free beer. So it keeps you focused on what's going on right now, and it also serves as a reminder to say, oh, I do need to drink. My throat feels a little dry, or gosh, I am a little tense. Let me relax, and focus on the positive things. And if rather than say, stop breathing too hard, I might say, I'm just going to relax my breathing. So you try and use positive words as much as possible.
So, funny story, I had a client that was pretty negative and down on himself, and he is an Ironman athlete, funny enough, so by himself a whole lot out there training and racing. And one of the things we talked about was it's a psychological tool. It's used a lot by psychologists and in psychology in general. And when you have a negative thought, put it somewhere in your head. Create a compartment for that negative thought. So you can put it there and lock it away. And for example, if I'm out there running and I just think, God, I'm slow, I'm not a good runner, I'm going to put that thought into that box, that negative box, and it's going to stay there, and I'm going to focus on my other positive thoughts. So I'll let it go through my head, but I'm not going to let it run through my head. I'm going to lock it away. And for this particular client, it's been very helpful because every time he has those negative thoughts, and he has a lot of them, he puts them away. And that way it leaves more room for I am a good runner. I'm actually doing really well. I've achieved so much. I have good form. I've come a long way. So, put those negative thoughts somewhere else.
So again, continuous self-check-in. So just asking yourself in your head over and going through, you can do it from, think about it, doing it from head to toe. Okay, my eyebrows are knitted, relax them. What's my breathing doing? How are my shoulders? Am I breathing too deep or too shallow? Am I holding tension in my hips? You can just go through yourself and whatever works for you. And like any of these tools, it's just like you do your swim, bike, and run training. You have to practice them. And another tool sort of related to the continuous self-check-in, it's because it's very simple, are mantras. And these are the little positive sayings that you can say to yourself over and over. And I threw up a couple examples of ones I've used in the past. For example, rather than Krista gave the example of the client saying, "Oh, I'm a slow runner," why not say, "I run with the grace and endurance of a gazelle"? Even though I may not, at least I can create that picture in my mind and make it more likely to happen, rather than if I tell myself I'm slow, I'm going to be slow. So, again, these are simple phrases. There's 3 examples here. They focus on some area that you want to improve on, and they always speak in the positive as if they're already happening. So rather than say, "I can swim effortlessly like a dolphin," I do swim effortlessly like a dolphin. So make them about the here and now and positive. And these are things, kind of bring you back to, that focus and being in the moment right now. And, I swim effortlessly like a dolphin. I swim effortlessly like a dolphin, over and over will keep me focused on my swim stroke and help me, at least mentally, feel like I'm swimming effortlessly like a dolphin. And our last tool, this is sort of our catch-all. It started out as be flexible, and then I added stay positive too. And another great quote: "The bamboo which bends is stronger than the oak which resists." So what does this mean from a triathlete's perspective? And I threw a picture up there of this is a swim start at the Luray Triathlon in Virginia. I'm the race director for it. And if you look at it, it looks like a little bit of a turmoil for some of those athletes right in the middle. So a lot of thrashing and getting beaten around. And it's sort of a metaphor for life and for the rest of the race as well, because stuff's going to happen. You might get kicked in the head. You might get bumped into. Someone may smack you. You might swim over somebody. Someone might swim over you. So it's really how do you deal with that stuff and get through it. And here's a picture of a cyclist. It looks like a triathlete. These guys are bars. He looks like he has some race numbers. So he's in the middle of his race. He's got a flat tire. It happens, unfortunately. And I remember when I did Ironman Canada as my first. Actually, I take that back. It was Ironman Lake Placid. So back in 1999, it was the first year they did the race, and I had two flats. So I had a flat on the first half of the course, or the first loop of the bike, and then I had another flat on the second loop, and I only had one spare, so I had to wait for sag support the second time. But it was very frustrating, and gosh, I always think back, what could I have done differently, and maybe I had too much air in my tires. But stuff like that's going to happen. Whether it's that I've dropped water bottles before, so they bounce out of my cages. I've started a half Ironman. I forgot to grab my gel flask for the bike, and they didn't have any gel on the course. Maybe it's going too fast on the run, and you overheat. Maybe it's forgetting to drink, and you get dehydrated. So stuff's going to happen, and it's inevitable. So no one has that perfect race, and it's really the athletes that do well, and doing well is a relative term. So is the ones that are able to adapt and overcome. So like the bamboo, they're flexible, they deal with it. So this athlete, he looks pretty calm. He's just sitting there. He's fixing it. Deal with it and move on. And Krista mentioned Vineman. That's one of my favorite full distance races. It's actually the oldest Ironman distance race in the continental U.S. and this will be their 25th year this year. But I had the privilege of winning it twice, and the second time, there's this big hill in the second half. It's a two-loop bike course on the second half, so it's towards the end of the second loop. There's this hill called Chalk Hill, and there's also a really nice winery called Chalk Hill Winery, and you go by a lot of wineries on the course. But I remember there was a group of it was either 3 or 5 cyclists ahead of me, and they were riding together, and they actually, a couple of them got busted for drafting later on, but I was riding by myself, and I just caught up to them at the base of Chalk Hill, and so I was overtaking them, and then I flatted, and not even halfway up. So here I am, almost about to take the lead on the race, and I flatted, and I remember I was like, I was just cursing under my breath, but pulled over. There wasn't any sag support available right away, so I fixed my flat, and 6 or 7 minutes later I was back on my bike, and it was really frustrating. But I said, okay, let me just deal with it. I'm not gonna. I know I can't catch them because we only have about 10 miles to go, but I'll try and make it up on the run. And I ended up going on. I actually take that back. I think it was my first time winning Vineman, but I ended up on the run overtaking him, and I caught the last guy about 3 miles before the finish and passed him, and was able to come back and win the race. So, for me, it was like, wow, I had a bad experience, but I was able to overcome it. And sometimes things happen where you have to stop the race. It's mechanical. I did Vineman another year where my crank arm broke on my brand new carbon fiber crank arm broke, so I couldn't pedal, and so I had to just pull out of the race. So that was frustrating, but I did come back and race the following year. So the bottom line is just do the best you can, and you can maybe still salvage your race, and if not, you can always race again.
Okay, so this is I think one of the last slides, but I have a story to tell you. I know we all can, especially as endurance athletes, get a little bit self-conscious, and maybe sometimes we don't feel like we're an athlete because maybe we're not Dave Scott or, even a average level amateur triathlete. But when you think about all you do and how hard you work out, I think that's really what defines an athlete versus a non-athlete. So your ability to, focus on your health and fitness day in and day out. And the other night, it was last week, I went out with a few friends, and we met up with some people, and one of the girls we met up with was talking about her races that she'd been doing, some run races, and she kept emphasizing the fact that she was not an athlete. And we just listened to her kind of go on and on about all the races she's doing, but she doesn't do well, or she's not in it for competition, and over. So all these different things that she described herself as sort of a non-athlete. And my friend who she's actually raised as a professional athlete, we laughed, and she mentioned that this girl kept saying that, and how she could see right through that, and the fact that, she kept focusing on how non-athletic she was, yet she was competing a lot and working hard and maybe did need a coach or some support. And I think the important thing to take away from this is, like that girl describing herself as a non-athlete, she really was an athlete. And I think if she, talked about her events and focused on herself in a way that described her as somebody that, maybe on the commitment continuum it wasn't as high, but she did want to do well, it would almost make her do better, because again, it's that positive reinforcement. It's, our ability to, sort of just focus on the things that become real. And, David talked about in the beginning things that set, the best athletes apart from other athletes that are good is that mental ability to, focus and just reinforce the fact that you can do it, and it, and your ability to do it is there.
Okay, so we talked through 5 different tools. We talked about the commitment continuum and figuring out where you fall and asking yourself what your why is. We talked about setting goals. Um, we talked about being present and in the moment, so using mantras and doing that continuous self check-in. And we also talked about just being flexible and realizing stuff's going to happen and trying to be positive as much as we can. And these are 2 pictures. So that's Krista on the right, so she's having fun. This is actually before a race, but we were just kind of messing around. And when I think about racing, and unless you're out there, trying to make a living at it, which is not most of us. So there's quite a few of those folks here in Boulder. But for most of us, it's really about having fun, challenging ourselves. And one of the best things you can do, probably the simplest thing you can do to improve your race experience, is to smile. And it does wonders. So not only for yourself, but you get such a positive response from volunteers and spectators that they'll cheer you on more, and you do better. And and the bottom line is just do your best. And for me, I know I've made a lot of mistakes, and one of the benefits of doing a lot of Ironman races is I've probably made every mistake in the book you can, but I've also had a lot of successes. So sometimes you have to get through the the hurdles and the challenges to get to the what you're ultimately trying to accomplish.
Yep, I agree. Just make sure you're having a good time and enjoying yourself. That's really what it's all about.
Okay, so that concludes the formal part of our presentation. So thank you very much for attending. I'll get the recording up at schooloftrial.com in the library probably by Friday, hopefully by tomorrow. We do have 2 more upcoming webinars. You can find out more about them at schooloftrial.com. Best practice training tips, I think is the right name, but is focused on how to make the most out of your training, day in, day out, things you can do, like we talk about goal setting, having those weekly goals, making sure that you're consistent from week to week. So they're kind of going to some of the things we've picked up over the years that we've seen the more effective triathletes do. And then in March, we haven't done this one before, so we're excited to do it, is strength training for triathletes, and really talk about not only why it's important to do strength training, but kind of give you some example routines of exercises that are good, especially for triathletes, because there are a lot of problem areas that we see over and over again in triathlon, just because of the nature of the type of exercises we do. We got a comment from Nick. He says, I'm proud of the fact that I'm doing Alcatraz in June. However, my only experience in current has been the light current in the James River for the Patriots race, which I think they do a half and a sprint. Um, I'm intimidated by the Alcatraz swim, mid 50s water temperature, strong current, potential swells. What would be examples of mental things you would do leading up to Alcatraz?
So I've had several clients do that event, and one of the things that I think is really important is to swim around other people. And even though it's not Alcatraz and you don't have current, when you're around other people, you do get you have to fight the water a little bit more and learn to just manage your body a little bit better. So doing masters if you don't do that, and swimming as many open water opportunities as you can. And um, the big thing that I always try to do, especially if there is current or if there's a lot of people around me, is to relax into the water. So don't fight the water because the water will win. And if you bring your head up and you kind of gulp some water, you just bring your head back up and stay relaxed. And again, float, don't fight it, because the more you fight it, the more your body will fatigue. And those cold temperatures, it's hard to prepare for if you don't have a body of water to practice in that's cooler. But it's funny because there's been some famous swimmers that sort of try to acclimate to the cold by, sleeping with the temperature a little bit cooler. Um, so not freezing yourself to death. I don't want to, tell anybody to do that, but doing your best, just kind of acclimating to colder temperatures gradually, and they find that is helpful.
Yep, and I think kind of writing down. You talked about creating a pre-race plan. Writing down the things you need to do ahead of time. So you may want to research. Can you wear a neoprene cap? Can you wear neoprene booties? Maybe a thicker wetsuit. Just kind of thinking of those things ahead of time. So coming up with a plan, and then I think that whole visualization thing too. Really kind of planning over. It's going to be fast moving, um, and outside your control, right? Sometimes, it's going to be what it is. So, the extent, you kind of recognizing that, and rather than fight against it, just say, okay, how do I, make the most of it? If you can get in the water ahead of time, that's always ideal. I don't know if they do a practice swim or not. I honestly don't know. But like for anybody that is doing like an Ironman race or half Ironman, a lot of times they'll have practice swims a day or two before. Even though I've done hundreds of open water swims, I still like to get in the water just to kind of get a feel for it. And even if you can't actually practice, maybe just putting on your wetsuit and standing in it, the day before the race, just to kind of get a feel for, okay, this is what it feels like. I can do this. And so using those positive mantras or those little sayings over and over. I can swim comfortably and confidently in this water, or something like that.
Yeah, and one other quick thing I've learned from swimming in 50-degree temperatures in the water is you don't want to go out too fast. Your lungs are going to be a little restricted. If you try to go out harder than your body's ready for, you might just feel like you're hyperventilating a little bit. If you do feel like that, just scale back the pace, go as slow as you can. And what you'll find is your lungs will open up, you'll start to breathe more easily, and you can kind of build up your speed again. So you want to be able to get those muscles a little bit warmer and more oxygen to those working muscles a little bit more gradual. Don't go out and sprint and run into people. That's probably the worst thing you can do. So just stay relaxed and build into it. If you get a little bit heavy breathing, slow it down, and then gradually build back up.
Okay, Nancy writes, I'm a 50-year-old woman who likes to challenge myself. I love triathlons. Which training program is best to follow? Any books? And then I did a half Ironman last year.
Okay.
So there's a number of books out there. I mean, as coaches, we also have training programs we've written, and Krista actually has some specifically for women. There's links to them at schooltry.com, and enduranceworks.net is basically where we keep our training plans. For books, one of the Dave, we mentioned Dave Scott. He's sort of a legend in the sport. Another legend in the sport who we both had the opportunity to meet last year and sit down with is Sally Edwards. She's sort of one of the original triathletes. She's in the triathlon, I think it's USA Triathlon Hall of Fame. But she's one of the pioneers in the sport. She's written a number of books on training, specifically for women. But if you Google her name, and her website, I believe, is heartzones.com is one of them. But if you just Google Sally Edwards Triathlon, I think she's probably written close to 20 different books. But she'd be a great resource. There's Joe Friel has written the Triathlon Training Bible, so he's one of the more well-known and well-respected triathlon coaches out there. He's written a number of books related to triathlon.
Yeah, and David's book is wonderful. I recommend his book all the time, Full Time and Sub 9, because it gives you a good feel for a lot of different races and a lot of different distances. And it also, is a nice book. It's very human, it tells a story in his life, going through triathlon. So his book is great. And he puts together great training programs. We get a lot of good feedback on his programs. So, I have the women's specific programs, of course, and like you said, you can find those at School of Tri and Endurance Works. And we have tons of different length programs, distances, and you can ask us questions about the programs. Also, a book I really liked, I read Chrissy Wellington's book. She won Ironman Hawaii last year. She's never lost an iron distance race. So that was, a really good read that I do recommend. Um, and there, I also like the book called The Power of Habit. And I know I've talked to my client Sarah about this, and we've read it, and David's recommended it. It's really good if you're focused on longer distance triathlon and just kind of building good habits into your lifestyle in general. So who's the author of that one, David? I can't remember. But The Power of Habit is a really good one.
Yeah, I think for me, I always come back to the analogy of this giant jigsaw puzzle. And the longer the race, sort of the bigger, the more the pieces are, and trying to fit in all the different pieces. And it's interesting, as a coach, to try to help athletes go faster. And and obviously, if you become faster swimmer by a runner, you get faster that way. But two areas I think that most triathletes overlook where it's relatively easy to get faster. One is practice your transitions, and there's no reason anyone on this call can't be in the top 10% in terms of being fastest transitions. You don't have to be a good athlete to transition fast. You just have to practice and take off and put on fewer things. So that's an easy way to save a couple of minutes in a short race. And the other is some of these mental training tips, and starting with something as simple as, okay, here's my plan for my race. I'm going to visualize it, and here's some mantras I can say to myself. So different things. And then finally, I forgot the obvious. School.try.com is our education website built around the sport of triathlon. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, we've got about 100 videos breaking down all aspects of triathlon. Some are very basic, from how to choose a bike, how to change a flat tire, and then we've got a few on mental training. So I'm gonna roll some of this presentation back into individual videos, but they're anywhere from like a minute to 5 minutes long, so broken down by different categories. But I mentioned transitions. There's a video that shows you how you can practice transitions, a drill you can do. So definitely check that out, especially if you're new to triathlon. There's no charge for any of the content. It's all up on YouTube. We just want to make that, we wanted to make that available. And I know for me as an athlete, as I, kind of wind down from my athletic career, I wanted to capture all this experience and knowledge, from myself and from working with people like Dave Scott and, I think that, and then, some of the other great coaches and athletes we've both had the opportunity to interact with and train with and coach with. Any other questions? And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to necessarily be about mental training. Or if you have questions about other webinars we're doing, I think we've probably about a dozen webinars we've done in the past, and some of them, like this is one we do every year. So what's out on the website now will be refreshed with this one. But each time we do them, we basically totally update the presentation, and so there's always new material coming into it as we have new experiences or come up get new stories or have new examples. If you have a topic that we haven't talked about, we'd love to hear it. Like I said, we're trying to do one of these every month. The next one's focused on training practices. We'll do one coming up probably April or May, focus more on longer distance racing. So if you're doing half or full Ironman, because those are good. You can see the ones we've done in the past, but especially as you get into the longer distances, things they become a different animal. So a half Ironman is very different than an Olympic, and an Ironman is actually very different than a half because there's a lot more things you have to think about. So more pieces in that puzzle to try and solve.
And if you are a triathlete and you're not doing strength training, it's probably a good idea for you to tune into our webinar in March. And we do take time to, learn new things. We went to the National Strength and Conditioning Association, the conference, and I actually had been studying strength training for a very long time. I was a strength coach at a university in Maryland, and worked with a lot of different types of athletes. But I'm always learning new things, and I like to share that with everybody because with triathletes especially, it helps with injury prevention and enhanced performance. So our bodies are pretty out of balance when we swim, bike, and run all the time. And if we're not incorporating strength training, we're doing ourselves a big disservice. So that one would probably be worthwhile for a lot of people just to even get some tips that we've learned on cues and different things you can do with your strength exercises and with your swim, bike, run.
Okay, Nick has another good question. Do you have a mantra for hills or any special mental tool you call on when climbing hills? San Francisco will have a lot of them.
Yeah, I do have one actually. And when I'm watching athletes race, I yell this out all the time, and they kind of laugh, but they do it, and they say it helps. So I just tell them to pull the rope. And when you're, sort of pulling a rope, you think about swinging your arms a little bit more. When we're climbing a hill, the first thing we want to do is sort of slow down or decrease our range of motion, which you do slightly. But when you're pulling the rope, you sort of naturally push your hips forward a little bit, and it allows you sort of lift your knees, so it helps correct a lot of biomechanics naturally. And I just try to keep your cadence up a little bit because that helps. You keep so you keep moving at a pretty consistent pace rather than slow down too much.
Yeah. So think of pedaling smoothly, effortlessly. A term I've heard in the past, no chain. So there's like no chain. I mean, obviously you're gonna feel the chain because you're climbing, but the fact just keep your legs moving smoothly. And if they start to become too choppy, then you're probably in too hard a gear. The other thing I like to do, especially for longer hills, is to try not to look too far ahead. So it kind of goes back to if I can just say, okay, I'm just gonna pedal, then I'll pedal, then I'll pedal. So it's it's continuous, but realizing okay, I'll get through this. I just have to just pedal right now, pedal right now, pedal right now, and try and break it up that way rather than think, oh my God, I got to get to the top of this long hill and it's so long. So I say, okay, no, I'm just going to pedal, and not look too far ahead. So, anything else? And feel free to contact us too. There's our email addresses, or you can contact us through the schooltri.com website as well.
We were just talking about climbing, on the bike up hills. I have a client that she just loves to stay in the big ring and climb. And if if you're in that big ring and the hill's too steep, you're gonna push out a lot of watts. So if you have a power meter, and you watch that, you're sort of wasting energy. So the more efficient, like David said, you want to be efficient. You want your cadence comfortable, high. So be smart too. Don't try to be a hero on those hills.
Yeah. If you don't pay for it on the bike, you'll pay for it on the run. So. Yeah, and I guess the other thing I would add, just in preparing for them, to the extent that you can train on something like them or harder than, then when you get to the race, you're gonna think, oh, these aren't too bad. I've done worse. I always try and find something harder that I know I'm gonna actually be racing. If you don't have access to a lot of hills, maybe it's a really fast headwind. Cool. Okay. It looks like that's all the questions. So thank you very much for everyone who's sat in on this. I'll send out a link to this presentation, and I think I can send it out. It's online, Prezi.com, but I'll send out the link to it, and I may be able to do it. I'm pretty sure I can do a PDF as well, and then we'll get the recording up on YouTube as well. So once all that stuff's available, I'll email everybody. So thanks again for your time.